Hey guys, tonight, we journey into a world you think you know, but trust me, you don't. Because tonight, we're not tracking kings or chasing knights, we're hunting something far more common and far more cunning. We're slipping into the shadows of straw-filled cottages, listening for tiny feet, squeaks, and the scratching that haunted every medieval night. Tonight's story, the easy ways medieval peasants got rid of rats and mice. But don't worry, this isn't a horror story. Not really. It's a soft, strange little tale about survival ingenuity and how everyday people without poison, without pest control companies, and without the luxury of calling someone else to handle it, fought a quiet, squeaky war against the smallest invaders. Before we step into that world, if you enjoy these sleepy history journeys gently, like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and tell me in the comments what time it is where you are. I love seeing who's nodding off from where. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's story together. So, rats and mice, the eternal companions of humanity. Long before pizza crusts and subway tunnels, long before medieval London filled its alleys with refuse, rats were there, sniffing, skittering, and making themselves far too comfortable in homes made of timber thatch and dreams. And if you were a medieval peasant, you didn't have traps from the hardware store. You didn't have ultrasonic devices or pest sprays. You had whatever you could find. But somehow you managed. Because rats weren't just annoying. They were dangerous. They ate your grain, your bread, your cheese. They nested in your bedding. They carried fleas. And those fleas, well, we know how that turned out. So how did peasants people with no plumbing, no insulation, no disinfectant fight back? That's what we're diving into tonight. We'll explore the old tricks, the clever methods, the strange and sometimes superstitious ways that everyday people tried to protect their food, their homes, and their sanity from the endless tide of whiskers and tails. From barn cats to herbal bundles, from traps made of clay pots to prayers whispered over sleeping infants. From songs sung to saints to boots slammed against floorboards. Some of it worked. Some of it didn't. All of it tells us something about how people lived, really lived neath the grand tales of kings and castles. So tonight, you're not royalty. You're not a knight. You're a medieval peasant. And your worst enemy might just be 6 inches tall, covered in fur, and currently chewing on your last turnip. Let's begin. You wake to a sound. Not the sun filtering gently through gauzy curtains, not birds chirping a Disney-worthy morning serenade. No, you wake to chewing, close, near your head. It's that sharp, rhythmic gnawing, the unmistakable sound of something with tiny teeth nibbling confidently on something that was probably once yours. And it's not just one. There's a second noise, a scuffle, a squeak. You blink your eyes open to the dull, smoky dimness of your medieval cottage. You're on the floor, or rather on a flattened pile of straw spread over dirt so packed and cold it feels more like stone. Your blanket is wool. It smells like sweat smoke and centuries of dampness. You're wearing every layer of clothing you own, and you're still cold. And somewhere inside this room, a mouse is planning its next move. The room is dark. No windows. Just a wooden shutter nailed to the wall that barely closes. Your ceiling is thatch, and bits of it drop down. Sometimes seeds, sticks, and occasionally things that twitch. Your nose is stuffy. Your eyes sting. The air is thick with the smell of old smoke mold and the faint tang of dried animal dung used to fuel last night's fire. And somewhere among the half-buried rushes covering the dirt floor, you hear a new sound, scritch, scratch, scritch. You sit up slowly. Everything aches. Your spine complains. Your knees feel filled with sand. You reach to the side and find your cloak rolled up like a pillow, and as you shift, you feel something dart past your ankle. You freeze. It's gone now. But it was real, small, fast, unapologetic. The rat problem didn't get the memo that your life is already hard enough. You scan the room. In the faint morning glow slipping through a crack in the shutters, you see it all: the hearth empty and cold, the cookpot still crusted with last night's stew, the basket where you keep dried bread, tipped over. Next to it, a trail of tiny droppings. You sigh, stand, and stretch, but your body isn't ready for standing. Your breath curls in the air. You pull your tunic down over your knees, shuffle over to the hearth, and poke the ashes with a stick. Cold. Dead. You add a few bits of kindling and a dried cow pat from the corner pile. Light comes slowly. Heat even slower. Behind you, your youngest coughs. They're still wrapped in a blanket curled into your spouse's side. Another child stirs beside them. The room is full of breath-shared body heat and the quiet, constant presence of things you cannot see but can hear. Mice in the thatch. Rats under the floorboards. You step carefully because the rats are not afraid of you, and they will dart out from underfoot if they want something. You look toward the breadbasket again. A crust is missing. Gone. They took it. Probably last night while you were too tired to care. One bold rat could chew through the lid. 2 could drag food. 3 could ruin your winter. And you wonder how many are there now. You walk outside to fetch water, and as the door opens, you glance back. Quickly did something scurry for cover. Of course it did. Outside, the morning is cruel. Cold air wraps around your ankles. The frost bites through your sleeves. You walk to the well, pass your neighbor's cottage, and see her doing the same. Her sleeves are tied tight. Her hair is bundled under a rag. She gives you a nod. Lost another sack of oats, she mutters. You nod back. We've been burying the grain jars under coals you offer. Sometimes they stay out. Sometimes she says and shakes her head. The rats are winning this week. Back inside, the fire is catching. You lift the pot. There's nothing in it. You scrape the inside for flavor. Add water. Stir it. Maybe if you're lucky, someone traded you a carrot or a chunk of onion. Either way, breakfast is a thin affair, and the real issue is not what you eat, but whether it's still there. Last year, a rat got into your flour. You didn't know until the loaf was baked. The smell tipped you off. That and the soft crunch of something that shouldn't crunch. You threw the whole thing out. It was the hardest decision of the winter. Food is life. And rats, they are stealing your life. So you begin your morning not just by eating, but by checking. You scan the corners, the beams, the basket lids. You look for chew marks, droppings, holes in sacks. You tap the walls and floor with a stick. If something moves, you curse. If it doesn't, you curse anyway. This is the war you never stop fighting. But you're not helpless. Not entirely. You have tricks. You have traps. You have allies, 4-legged furry ones that live with you, not out of love, but out of mutual benefit. And tonight, you're going to do something about it. Because medieval peasants didn't just lie down and let the rats take everything. They got creative. You crouch near the hearth, breathing in the warmth, as the first flames finally catch. The light dances on the wall, flickering against the soot-stained beams and illuminating the worst of your domestic reality, your morning meal, and the hygiene situation that comes with it. Let's start with breakfast. You reach for the breadbasket again gingerly this time. You know what's in it and what isn't. Last night there were 2 small loaves. Now there's 1. Or at least, half of one. A bite-shaped hole marks the crust, and along the rim, tiny teeth marks. You sigh and snap the chewed part off, toss it toward the fire, and hope the flames deal with it better than you could. Because there is no rat-proof pantry. You don't have cabinets, or containers, or jars with rubber seals. Everything you eat is stored in bags, baskets, or wooden bins, anything you can cover, hide, or hang. But rats and mice are determined, resourceful, and persistent. They'll chew through bark, dig through packed earth, and scale walls just to steal a few grains. You break off a piece of the remaining bread and hand it to your child. They chew silently, too hungry to care that it's stale, cold, and crumbly. You ladle thin pottage into a bowl, yesterday's water, today's hopes. It's hot, at least. Warm enough to quiet the gnawing in your belly. For now. And as you eat, your eyes scan the room again. The rushes on the floor rustle faintly. Something is underneath, watching, waiting. You decide to do something about it. First you stomp near the corner, loudly. The rustling stops, then starts again. You grab the broom, if it can still be called that. It's more bundle than brush, tied with twine and good intentions. You sweep the floor, half expecting to hit a moving lump. You don't, but you know it's there. Rats live in the gaps between stones, beneath straw, behind the logs that form your walls. You've tried plugging holes with mud. You've scattered mint leaves, garlic skins, even chewed up nettles, old tricks passed down through whispers. Some say rats hate the smell. Others say they just hate effort. Either way, they always come back. Now on to hygiene. You step outside, your breath puffing in the cold. You go behind the hedge, the outhouse not yet emptied since the frost set in. When you return, you wash your hands in a bucket, if wash means dunk quickly in icy, questionable water. There's no soap, not every day. Soap is precious, made from fat and ashes, and you don't waste it on fingers unless you're bleeding. You rub your hands together, shake them dry, and return inside. Teeth, you chew a twig. A frayed branch tip scrubbed along your gums. If it breaks off and you swallow part of it, well, it's fiber. You spit. Something small runs behind the firewood. A tail disappears. You glance at your child. They're already scratching head, shoulder, back. Fleas or lice, doesn't matter. Both are regular guests. You kneel and check their hair, wincing at the signs, tiny black specks, eggs clinging to strands. Not rats, but cousins in misery. Everyone has them. You boil the comb when you can. You smear vinegar when you have it. Today you have neither. You put a dab of lard behind the ears instead. An old trick. Maybe it helps. Maybe it doesn't. The fire crackles. You hang the breadbasket from a ceiling beam, a new tactic. Maybe out of reach. Maybe not. And then before leaving for work, you pull the old clay pot from beneath the bed. It's chipped, soot-stained, and half-filled with dried oats. But today it's a trap. You smear the inside rim with honey. Rats are greedy. They lean in, they fall. Sometimes. Not always. But it's better than nothing. You set the pot near the hearth, right where the warmth meets the shadow, right where they love to hide. Your spouse watches silently. Cats would be better, they say. You nod. Of course. But your last cat disappeared in the winter. Maybe a fox. Maybe a fight. Maybe the Rat King, as some say, took offense. Still, you keep your eye out. You're always watching for a cat to adopt. One that hunts. One that doesn't mind fleas. For now, you set the trap. Brush your tunic clean, pull your belt tight, and prepare to leave. There's a rat in the walls, a mouse in the grain. But for now it's time to go, because the pests may steal your food, but the Lord will take your home if you're late. You're dressed. That is to say, you've added a second tunic over your first, wrapped a woolen scrap around your neck, and shoved your feet into the same stiff leather boots you've worn every day since harvest season. They're still damp from yesterday's walk. They're always damp. Your cloak is heavy and smells like everything you've done in the past month: smoke, sweat, soil, and a hint of boiled onion. You check the inside pocket. Yes, the dried sprig of mint is still there. Not because you plan to chew it, but because some say the scent wards off rats. Whether it works, unclear. But in a world where you sleep beside your grain and eat beside your broom, any charm is worth keeping. The rats are everywhere, and that means your clothes are never safe. You shake out your wool hood before putting it on. Not out of habit, but because 2 winters ago, a mouse decided it made a decent nest. You discovered that fact the hard way, with a warm tickle and a small scream. Now you check everything, every time. You glance around your home, your sanctuary, your stronghold, your glorified animal den. It's a one-room hut, maybe 10 feet across. The walls are wattle and daub woven sticks packed with mud, dung, and hope. The floor is dirt covered in rushes. You try to change them out monthly, but sometimes it's every season. And sometimes you don't bother at all. The rushes are meant to soak up mess. In truth, they soak up everything: spills, droppings, crumbs, and secrets. They also make perfect hiding places for rodents. You sweep, sure, but sweeping means disturbing them. So you do it slowly, gently, the way you might wake a sleeping baby or a sleeping bear. Your furniture is simple: a stool, a rough table, a box you sit on which also holds your tools. The bed is straw on a wooden frame or just a pile of old sacks layered with more old sacks. At night, you pile on every bit of cloth you own. In winter, you sleep fully dressed, wrapped in cloaks, beside your spouse, your children, maybe the goat. The goat at least keeps the rats nervous, but not enough. You look up at the ceiling. The thatch is dense, dark, and sagging in the corner where rain leaked last week. You've seen rats up there skittering in the rafters, chewing at twine, sometimes dropping bits of thatch as they pass. They live in your roof. There's no getting around it. You once tried to stuff the gaps with herbs: sage, mint, rosemary. Supposedly they hate the smell, but all it did was make the house smell like a failed soup. The rats didn't care. You even tried placing cat dung up there, a trick you heard from the Reeves' wife. Make them think a predator lives up there, she'd said, winking. You don't know if it worked. But your roof hasn't collapsed yet, and that's something. Your shelves, simple planks nailed to the wall, are raised high away from the floor. That's on purpose. Rats go for the low-hanging fruit first. Literally. You keep your cheese in a hanging basket. It dangles from the ceiling, suspended by a leather cord. It still doesn't stop them. They climb the beams. They leap. Once you woke up to find a rat chewing through the twine with calm, mechanical precision, mid-air, upside down, eyes unblinking. You cut that basket down, replaced it with a metal hook. It bent under the weight of a sack of barley. You now store your grain under the floorboards in sealed clay pots. Tightly sealed. One with a stone lid, the other with a leather wrap bound in string. Not airtight, but harder to reach. You've learned that rat-proof is not a real thing, only rat-resistant. You also keep traps, not modern ones. No springs, no metal jaws. Just rudimentary clay pots propped up with sticks baited with stale bread and honey. When they trip, the pot falls. If you're lucky, you catch one. If not, the bait's gone and the stick's still standing. There are better traps, you've heard. iron teeth that snap, buckets with spinning rods. But iron is expensive. Wood breaks, clay shatters. You do what you can. And if all else fails, you bang a stick on the floor before bed. 3 times. Always 3. Some say the sound frightens them off. Some say it's superstition. You say it helps you feel like you're trying. And that counts for something. Because when you live in a world where rats are more reliable than rain, you learn to share your space, or you find small, stubborn ways to fight back. So as you step into your cloak, check your boots for stowaways, and pat your belt for that one surviving garlic bulb, you tell yourself it's a good day. No visible rat droppings in the water bucket. Only 2 holes in the grain sack. And nobody got bit. Yet. The first thing you feel in the morning isn't peace. It's pressure. A heavy, dull, bone-deep kind of pressure that reminds you before you've even opened your eyes that your survival is not guaranteed. You don't wake up refreshed. You wake up behind schedule. Because the fields don't care that your back aches. The weeds don't care that you dreamed of a better life. And your Lord certainly doesn't care that your child coughed blood through the night. You roll out of your straw mattress if you're lucky enough to have one, and the soreness follows. Muscles stiff from yesterday's work. Hands raw from tools with splinters and iron that bites back. You stretch, wince, and try not to think about the fact that the next 12 hours will be harder. Your day begins in the fields always. Wheat doesn't sow itself. Barley doesn't harvest without blood and calluses. You carry a wooden plow behind an ox that's as tired as you are hoping the soil isn't too wet from last night's rain. You're ankle-deep in mud swarmed by gnats and cursing the rocks that dull your blade every 20 feet. The sun climbs slowly, mockingly, and there's no break, no union, no mercy. Even when your tools are dull, you keep swinging. Even when your hands blister, you don't stop. Because stopping means falling behind. And falling behind means less food in the winter and possibly another death in the family. You're not just tending crops. You're fending off death one handful of grain at a time. And those crops you grow, most of them don't even belong to you. You owe a portion, sometimes half or more, to the local lord. He owns the land. You just bleed into it. You might get to keep 1/3 of your harvest. Or less. The rest is tax. Delivered in grain, eggs, chickens, labor. Even your children might be pressed into service when the manor demands extra help. And if it's harvest season, forget sleeping. You work from dawn until the moon rises, swinging a sickle over and over again until your arms burn and your fingernails fill with dirt. Your job isn't done until the last stalk is bundled and the Lord's barn is full. And then there's the winter. You don't rest in winter. You scramble. You mend tools. You fix fences battered by storms. You slaughter animals you can't afford to feed and pray the meat doesn't rot or draw wolves. If the snow's not too thick, you cut firewood. If it is, you burn old shoes or anything else that'll hold a flame. Starvation looms like a shadow, and you feel it with every mouthful of thin porridge, wondering if the food will last until spring. Women work just as hard, maybe harder. They rise early to prepare meals over smoky fires, tend children, spin wool, and milk animals. Then they head to the fields, or the market, or the manor house to scrub the Lord's floors. Survival doesn't care about gender roles. Children, too, are pressed into labor early. By the time you're 7, you're herding geese, fetching water, collecting firewood. School. That's for the church's children. You learn by doing or failing. And when you're not farming, you're building. Fences, coops, carts, roofs, everything falls apart constantly. Because wood rots, thatched roofs leak, rats chew, and there's no hardware store. Only you, a dull knife and time. And still the labor doesn't end. There's bread to bake ale, to brew cloth, to weave buckets, to patch. One job leads to another, and the days blur. Sometimes you pause to sip water from a cracked jug and squint at the horizon, not looking for beauty, but for signs of weather. A storm could undo weeks of work. One hard frost could kill your only surviving piglet. And if you're a serf, the burden doubles. Not only do you owe labor to your lord's fields, you owe your body your obedience and your future. You can't leave without permission. You can't marry who you want. You're tied to the land more property than person. And the punishment for disobedience, fines, floggings, or being publicly humiliated in the stocks, while your neighbors spit and the children laugh. Sometimes if you're not a farmer, you're a tradesman, a blacksmith, a tanner, a cooper. But that life isn't easier. It's blistering heat, chemical burns, hammer strikes, and foul smells. The tanner works ankle-deep in urine-soaked hides. The blacksmith breathes smoke instead of air. The miller loses fingers to gears. Each job is dangerous in its own way, and none are secure. A bad injury means starvation. There's no disability pay, no workers' comp. You work until you break, and then you beg. But even begging requires permission in many towns, and even that might cost you. Some dream of leaving, of escaping to a city. But the city brings its own dangers, crowded tenements, filthy streets, corrupt guilds, and disease. And if you're caught leaving your village without a permit, you can be branded as a runaway. Your ears might be cut. Your family punished in your place. You labor because it's the only option. And you pray. Not because you're pious, but because it's the only power you're allowed to invoke. You pray the harvest holds, that the rain comes late, that your back lasts another season. You don't dream of wealth, you dream of enough. A full belly, a warm bed, a winter without loss. And when the sun finally sets and your hands fall still, you don't feel rest. You feel the weight of tomorrow pressing already against your ribs. This is your life, a life of labor pain and waiting for the harvest, for relief, for the chance to stop being tired. And still you work, because that's the only way not to die. You're home again, barely. Your hands ache, your stomach rumbles, and the sun is beginning to slip behind the trees. You sit by the fire hunched, staring into the shallow glow, as smoke curls toward the thatch. And you wonder not for the first time if it's not just your hard work that keeps the rats at bay, but something else. Because in the medieval world, belief isn't optional. You believe because not believing means danger. Not just spiritual danger, but practical, immediate. The kind that scurries, scratches, and steals in the night. Rats, after all, are more than just pests. They're omens, symbols, agents of sin, disease, and disorder. And in a world where science is a whisper and faith is a roar, you take every threat seriously, especially the ones with whiskers. You've heard the stories. The farmer who ignored the church fast and found rats in his grain. The woman who spoke ill of her priest and woke to find her bed swarming with squeaking punishment. The rat that wouldn't die no matter how many times it was struck until a prayer was said aloud and a cross drawn in the soot. Coincidence, maybe, but you don't tempt fate. You hang herbs over the door, sage, rosemary, rue, not just for scent, but protection. Old folks say rats hate strong smells. The church says holy herbs drive out evil. Either way, they're staying up. You draw a tiny cross in the flour before baking bread. You mutter a blessing over your grain sacks. You never sweep after dark unless you want to invite spirits into your home or anger the household saint. Because yes, you have a saint. Everyone does. Yours is Saint Gertrude of Nivelles, patron saint of cats, of hospitality, and of protection against rats and mice. Her image is carved into a wooden token tied with twine and hung near your food shelf. She watches over your kitchen. She understands. You light a candle near her likeness when things get especially bad, when you find droppings near the sleeping mat or hear skittering overhead. You whisper her name as you fall asleep, asking not just for peace but for silence. There are other protections too. Some tie bells to their doors, not to scare away people but to warn of pests. Others place iron nails at the corners of the house, or broken glass buried at the threshold, old magic meant to confuse or injure the spirits of vermin. Some leave a slice of bread at a crossroads soaked in ale with a pin stuck in the middle, an offering or a trap depending on who you ask. And if all else fails, there's the charm. Simple words passed down in whispers muttered under breath. By claw and tail and gnawing tooth, by holy hand and spoken truth, leave this home and seek no more. Be gone from hearth, from grain, from floor. You don't know where it came from, but your grandmother said it before every harvest. And her bread never vanished in the night. And let's not forget the cats. Cats are not just animals. They're protectors, hunters, half-spiritual creatures with eyes like judgment and paws like silence. You feed yours even when food is scarce, because if the cat leaves, so does your last line of defense. But cats, too, are double-edged. Too many, and the priest may raise an eyebrow, especially if you're a woman. Too many cats, too much solitary time, too many herbs in your pouch, and suddenly you're a whisper away from being called a witch. So you tread carefully. You keep one cat, maybe two. You don't speak to them out loud in public. You don't collect bones or mark symbols. You don't stir your stew counterclockwise, even if it sometimes helps. The line between piety and paganism is thin, and when rats come, people look for someone to blame. Witchcraft, curses, bad air, ungodly behavior. You do your part. You go to church. You cross yourself. You keep a bottle of holy water from last Easter tucked beneath your bed. It smells sour now. You don't dare open it. You've seen what happens when someone's accused. The whispering, the sudden coldness, the reeve knocking on your door asking questions that have no right answers. All because someone's cheese vanished overnight and the rats didn't leave footprints. So you believe. In saints, in prayers, in the sharp line between blessing and curse. You do everything you can, because when the world makes no sense and the rats keep coming despite your traps, your herbs, your careful sweeping faith is all you have. Faith in something larger than you. Faith in something that might listen. Faith in the idea that maybe, just maybe, a whispered charm and a cedar sprig by the door might save your last sack of grain from hungry little teeth. Evening settles like a blanket over the village. The fields go quiet. The tools are hung up. The animals fed. The sky darkens to a bruise-colored violet, and inside your home the small fire flickers with more hope than heat. It's time for the main meal, which for a medieval peasant is not a feast, it's a ritual of survival. A small shared steaming bowl of something that might have been stew if life had been a little kinder. Tonight the pot is filled with pottage. Again. You dip the ladle in. It's thick, barely. A mixture of barley, wild herbs, dried beans, and a couple of small turnips. No meat. Not this week. That dried bit of bacon rind you were saving. The rats got to it. You serve the stew into wooden bowls, each with a different kind of crack or scorch. Your child gets the one with a missing corner. They don't complain. They're just happy there's something warm. You slice bread thin, hard, almost sharp. The outer crust is fine. The inner part. You pause. Gnaw marks. You scrape them off with a knife. Toss the chewed parts into the fire. A hiss. A smell. You say nothing. Everyone eats. There's no table. Just laps. Sometimes a low board balanced on stones. And as you eat, you keep one eye on the shadows. Rats are brave in winter. Sometimes they dart into the light. Once you stabbed one with a spoon. Everyone remembers that night. You still have the tail hung near the door for luck. Drinks ale if you've brewed any recently. Weak and cloudy, but safer than the water from the stream. Wine is for lords and saints. You've tasted it once. You still dream about it. On rare nights, someone brings out a bit of cheese. That night isn't tonight. You chew, you swallow, and for a moment there's peace. After the meal, the pot is refilled with water, some peels, whatever's left. You set it on the hearth to cook through the night. Tomorrow's breakfast begins now. And now if there's energy left, there's entertainment. You'd think after a day of crushing labor, people would go straight to sleep. But no. In this world, laughter is rebellion. Music is medicine. And storytelling is the only theater you'll ever afford. You gather near the fire. Neighbors drift in. There's no privacy, not really. Everyone's door is always open or easily pushed. A shared fire is better than 10 cold ones. Someone brings a fiddle missing a string. Someone else starts humming a tune. You tap your foot not quite in rhythm, and your child full of turnip and barley tries to dance. There are stories old, recycled, half-true, about saints who cursed mice, about men who turned into wolves, about a rat the size of a dog who lived beneath the monastery and knew how to count coins. Someone laughs. Someone adds to the tale. Someone throws a stick at the rafters when they hear a rat skittering above. You all pause, then laugh again. Because this is your world. Music, mud, mice. Sometimes someone juggles, or sings a rude song, or mimics the Reeves' pompous walk. And sometimes there's a game, stones and chalk, a riddle contest. A dare to stick your hand into a hole in the wall and see if the rat bites. No one takes that dare twice. If the moon is full, people might gather outside. If it's market day tomorrow, they talk about what to trade. If someone's wedding is near, they argue about which saint to invoke for good luck. Saint Gertrude again, probably. And if someone's died because someone always has, they drink more, talk softer, and tell stories about how that person once outwitted a nest of mice with only a broom and a bottle of vinegar. You hold your child close. Their head is on your lap, their fingers sticky with pottage, their breathing deepening. And for a brief flicker in time, the rats seem far away, even if you can still hear them in the walls. You watch the fire dim, the stories slow. Someone snores, someone coughs, a baby whimpers and is hushed. And you think this is what you work for. Not wealth, not luxury, just this. A meal, a laugh, a child asleep on your knee, a roof that doesn't yet leak. And maybe if the traps worked, one fewer rat than yesterday. It's not much. But tonight, it's enough. The fire is nearly out. The pot simmers low. You're lying on your bedroll, more sack than mattress, listening to the small sounds of night settle in. A distant owl, wind in the trees, and then, of course, the familiar rustle. Rats again. You hear one crawl across the beam overhead. You freeze. Another scampers near the hearth. Then a soft squeak, sharp, delicate, almost human in the silence. You pray they stay near the walls and not your sleeping child. You close your eyes and try to ignore the aching in your chest. It's been there all day. A weight, a tightness. Not enough to stop you from working, but enough to remind you that your body is slowly failing. Maybe it's just cold. Maybe it's something worse. Because when you're a medieval peasant, illness isn't a question of if only when and how badly. You wake with sores. You sleep with fevers. You cough blood and still go to work. You collapse in a field and hope someone notices before the crows do. Your body is always under siege, not just from the elements, the labor, the hunger, but from the vermin. Rats and mice aren't just nuisances. They're messengers of disease, harbingers, carriers of fleas, of filth, of things that spread without mercy. You don't know the word bacteria. You've never heard of viruses, but you understand cause and effect. Where rats go, death follows. You've seen it. The child who played near the granary and came down with swelling. The old man who cut himself chasing a mouse and died 3 days later, black around the edges. The strange sickness that came last winter. Boils, groans, people dying with prayers still on their tongues. You don't know the name of the plague, but it knows you. And when it comes, nothing helps. Not prayers, not poultices, not the old woman with her sack of herbs, not even the priest. Still you try. You burn herbs. Rosemary, sage, sometimes dried mint if you can spare it. Not to heal, but to purify, to clear the air, to drive away whatever invisible poison the rats leave behind. You crush garlic, rub it on doorposts, boil it in soup. Some say it keeps illness away. Others say it just keeps you from smelling the rot. If someone gets sick, you quarantine them. Not that you use that word. You just put them in the corner, wrap them in blankets, give them water if you have any, and hope. Bloodletting is still a common remedy. So are leeches. So is cutting into the skin with a sharp rock and pressing out the bad blood. If that doesn't work, the illness is either in the brain or sent by God. Or rats. You're starting to think rats are God's little reminder that humans are never truly in control. You've seen neighbors die. Some in their sleep. Some with a scream. Some with nothing left to scream with. And when they go, you bury them quickly. The earth is cold. The grave is shallow. You say a prayer, draw a cross, and mark the spot with a stone. Sometimes you dig 2 graves, just in case. And you clean, as best you can. You scrub the bowls with ash. You toss out the rushes. You boil the rags. You sweep every corner, every nook, trying to erase the droppings, the trails, the chewed edges. Because if you miss something, just one bit of rat filth, someone else might fall sick. You've heard tales of magical cures, a rare mushroom, a prayer whispered in Latin, a cat with 3 colors. You'd try anything. You have tried anything. Some say the rats can smell sickness, that they swarm the dying, that if you see them gather in the rafters, it means death is in the room. You believe it, because they always show up just before things get worse. Even the cat hesitates to chase them when someone's ill. It's as if they know. So you whisper a prayer. You light a stump of candle. You check on your child. Their forehead is warm. You tuck the blanket higher. You crush a mint leaf and place it under their nose. Maybe it helps. Maybe it doesn't. And then you lie back down. Not because you're better, but because you're too tired to do anything else. You're not afraid of dying exactly. You're afraid of dying badly, in pain, alone, in a corner too weak to speak, or worse, dying and being discovered days later. Your food eaten, your fire dead, your eyes open. The rats wouldn't wait. You've seen what they do to bodies, so you fight to live. With herbs, with traps, with prayers. You fight to keep your family safe, to keep your food clean, to keep the rats out. Not because you're strong, but because you're desperate. Because the only thing more persistent than a rat is a peasant who still believes tomorrow might be better. It's morning again, or something close to it. You stir awake not because the rooster crows, but because your child's elbow is in your ribs and someone's small foot is kicking off the shared blanket. You open one eye and find 4 other people pressed into the space where maybe 2 could sleep comfortably. And that's just your family. The room smells like bodies, like old ash, and of course like rats. You spot a new hole in the rushes near the wall. Another entry point. Another reminder. The war is never over. You nudge your spouse awake. We need to plug that up today, you murmur. They grunt. They've seen it too. This is your home, not your castle, not your retreat. Just one room, one fire, one roof trying its best not to collapse. And inside it, your world. Your spouse, your children, your livestock. If you have any, and the tiny intruders that refuse to leave you in peace. Women in this world are the uncredited engineers of survival. If you are one, your work never ends. If you're not, you see it clearly enough. You're up before dawn to sweep, stir the pot, knead the dough, boil the herbs. You breastfeed one child while pulling lice from another's hair. You try to teach them a prayer while stirring pottage and shooing away the cat that keeps trying to nap in the fire ashes. You don't get thanks. You don't expect it. You just keep moving. Because if you don't, no one eats. If you don't, the rats will win. You're also the first to notice when the food's been tampered with. Your hands know the shape of your bread. When something's nibbled, when something smells off, you act fast, scrape, salvage, hide the rest. You hang the baskets higher. You tie the lids tighter. You light a bit of mint near the cooking shelf. Your grandmother taught you that. Said it helped. You don't know if it does, but you'd rather smell mint than mice. Children grow up fast, not out of ambition, but necessity. By 4, they're useful. By 6, they're indispensable. Fetching water, scaring crows, holding the baby while you chop onions, banging a pot when a rat tries to steal the cheese. You give them sticks and tell them to guard the hearth. You reward them with a crust of bread or a good word. They beam. They're proud. They want to help. But they also get sick easily, hurt often. And when they die, and many do, it breaks something in you. But not for long. You don't have time for long grief. Because someone has to keep the fire going. Family life in this world is built on necessity. Love is there, of course it is, but it hides beneath layers of habit, ritual, and shared exhaustion. You don't say, "I love you." You say, "Eat this while it's warm," or "Hold the door while I sweep the droppings," or "Sleep on this side, it's drier." Romance, if you're lucky, it's a smirk by the fire, a shared laugh when the neighbor falls in mud, a quiet moment watching your child chew bread with both cheeks full. You fight often. Tensions rise. The room is small. Privacy is non-existent. When someone snores, everyone knows. When someone passes gas, it's a topic of discussion. But you also forgive quickly, because the world is cruel enough already. You huddle together on stormy nights. You sing old songs. You tell stories about saints and monsters, about clever girls who outsmarted devils and boys who caught rats using only a fishing line and cheese. You make up bedtime stories. Sometimes they're about a world without rats. Your children laugh. They don't believe you. You laugh too. Women carry the burden of memory, of medicine, of mourning. They prepare the dead. They care for the sick. They birth the future and bury the past. Men work too, of course, but they get breaks, trips to the field, excuses to be outside. Women are always inside, in the kitchen, at the hearth, in the darkness, with the rats. The children learn quickly who to trust, where the traps are, how to store cheese so it's harder to find. They become experts in survival, short, clever, scrappy souls who chase mice for sport and find humor in hunger. And still they're children. They play with sticks. They make dolls from scraps. They imitate the cat. They try to trap a rat with a bucket and a carrot. You let them. You even help them sharpen the stick. Because one less rat is always a victory. You're not a rich family. You never will be. But you're not broken either. You're tired. You're scarred. You're covered in soot and sleeplessness. But somehow, against every odd, your family endures. Together. Because that's what family means here, not love songs or sweet words. But warmth in the dark, food that's shared, burdens that are too heavy for one, but manageable for many. And even when the rats return, even when they chew through your best basket and steal your last dried fig, you lean on each other. You curse, yes. You despair. But then someone gets the broom. Someone lights the fire. Someone plugs the new hole with mud and prayer. And the family continues. Not perfectly, but together. By afternoon, your muscles have long since stopped complaining. Pain has become background noise like the birds overhead, or the murmurs of your neighbors grumbling about weather tacks or fleas. Your body simply functions, now moving from task to task, as if pulled by invisible thread. But the real exhaustion isn't always physical, it's social. Because while rats nibble at your grain and your roof, it's the other people in your village who sometimes feel like the real threat. Take today. You're hauling firewood back from the edge of the forest. Your shoulders ache, your palms blister. And as you walk past your neighbor's cottage, you notice something strange, a new sack of grain by her door. But she's been complaining for weeks about her stores running low. You don't say anything, but you think it. A few hours later, she passes you near the well. You nod. She doesn't nod back. Now she's thinking something. And so it begins the spiral of petty suspicions that shape your village's social life. Because here's the truth, the rats may be stealing your food, but sometimes you can't help but wonder if your neighbors are too. Someone's trap goes missing. Someone swears they heard gnawing in their wall right after borrowing your extra barley sack. And when there's a surge in rodent activity, everyone starts pointing fingers. Maybe someone's storing spoiled meat. Maybe the tanner's son hasn't been cleaning properly. Maybe the widow's cat stopped hunting because someone is feeding it too well. These aren't jokes. These are seeds of conflict. You keep your voice down. You keep your storage locked if such a thing is possible with twine and broken hinges. You keep your business your own. But privacy is a luxury you don't have. Everyone sees everything. And when people are tired, hungry, and scared of disease, even a missing turnip can ignite a war. One year, a girl was accused of attracting rats with magic. Just a girl, 16 maybe. She had dried flowers hanging in her window, spoke softly, slept during the day and wandered at night. Unusual, yes. Dangerous, no more than the rest of you. But the rats swarmed her home. People panicked. They whispered. Then they shouted. The priest was called. The herbs were burned. Her cat disappeared. She moved to the edge of the village, and then one morning she was gone. No one talks about it now. Not out loud. But when your broom goes missing, you glance toward the forest. Just in case. It's not all suspicion. There are also arguments. Over who used whose tool. Over who left grain open. Over whose firewood pile attracted vermin. You remember one man who came home to find his floor swarming. The rats had chewed through the wall, made a nest beneath his cot. He shouted, threw things, accused the neighbors of calling them in with unclean habits. It nearly came to blows. Only the arrival of the reeve calmed things down. And by calmed, you mean he fined both men and reminded everyone that rats don't care about guilt, they care about food. Still, the damage was done. They haven't spoken since. Then there's the problem of shared space. The granary, the well, the baking oven. You all use them. You all depend on them. But one careless person can spoil it for everyone. A sack left open, a hole not patched, bread dough left too long. It takes only one rat, one bite, one trail of droppings, and suddenly everything's in question. So you watch, you judge, you whisper, but you also help. Because sometimes struggle breeds kindness. You lend your extra pot. You trade a lump of soap for a turnip. You show a child how to make a better trap. Because when it comes to rats, unity works better than isolation. And sometimes in those rare moments of calm, the village comes together. Someone organizes a cleanup. The young ones sweep the streets. The elders patch walls. The cats are fed a little extra. You all hum as you work, not happy exactly, but connected. The rats will come back. They always do. But for now, you've made it harder for them. And sometimes that's all the victory you get. Still beneath it all, the pressure remains. Pressure to keep up appearances, to avoid blame, to seem in control even when your roof is leaking and your best shirt has holes. Because in this world, perception is survival. If the rats overrun your home, people will notice. They'll wonder what you did wrong, what sin you failed to confess, what rule you ignored. So even as you sweep your floor patch, your sacks feed your cat, you also sweep your image patch, your story, and feed the idea that you're doing just fine, even if you're not. Because the social world of a peasant village is like a thatched roof in a rainstorm. Fine when things are calm. A disaster when the wind picks up. So you choose your words carefully. You help just enough. And when the rats scratch in the corner, you don't blame your neighbor. Out loud. You just set another trap. And wait. Night doesn't arrive with grace in your world. It drops like a weight. Heavy. Absolute. Inevitable. There are no glowing lamps, no flickering screens, no gentle transition from day to dark. Just the sudden absence of light, the kind that swallows everything in a single gulp. And with it, fear. Because nighttime in a medieval peasant's life is not peaceful. It's when things crawl. You've stuffed rags into the wall gaps. You've checked the food baskets twice. You've clanged your broom against the hearthstones like a spell. But still they come. The rats are emboldened now. The fire's embers are low, the human movements are fewer, the shadows deep and undisturbed. You hear them before you see them. The scratch of claws against wood. The soft, methodical gnawing that means something precious, maybe a sack of oats, maybe your child's blanket is being slowly destroyed. One darts across the rushes bold as a tax collector. Another scuttles into the thatch above your head. You lie still. Not out of comfort, but calculation. If you move too fast, they scatter. But not away, just deeper, behind the beams, under the floor, into the walls, and when they vanish, it's worse. Because then you can't track them. You imagine them near your baby's crib, near your breadbasket, near your face. Sleep comes slowly, and when it does, it's shallow, full of flinches, half dreams where rats are enormous, human-eyed, clever. Sometimes you dream of silence. Not peace, just the kind of quiet where you don't have to listen for footsteps the size of a thumb. But even in sleep, you're not safe. Because the dangers of the night aren't just small and furry. They're cold. The kind that creeps under the doorframe and coils around your toes. That stiffens your fingers and makes your cough sound worse in the dark. You pull the blanket tighter. You pull your child closer. Your spouse turns in their sleep, murmurs something, and then stills. Outside, something howls. A dog. Maybe. Or not. You've heard stories of things that walk at night, shapes with no names, faces without skin. You've heard of spirits that enter through cracks and steal the breath from sleepers. You've heard rats are messengers of such things, that their presence isn't just pestilence but punishment. For what, no one's sure. But no one takes chances. A dried sprig of rosemary hangs above the door. A tiny carved cross is wedged into the rafters. A pouch of salt under the bed. Just in case. Your neighbors are quiet. Too quiet. Which makes you wonder, are they asleep or listening to? And then you hear it. A faint cry. Not from inside your home, but close. From the street, the edge of the forest, a child, a fox, a trick. You don't open the door. You never open the door. Because people disappear in the dark. And sometimes all they leave behind are claw marks and a chewed boot. In the village, death is never far, but at night it sits closer, right beside you, breathing barely. You don't count days anymore. You count who's still alive. And when someone vanishes, you check their home for signs of struggle. Not blood. Bite marks. Rats don't wait for funerals. You've seen it. A man too sick to rise, left alone for a day. By the time someone returned, the rats had already begun their work. The cat wouldn't go near the body. The priest said nothing, just crossed himself and muttered something in Latin. You sleep with a stick near your mat now. Not to fight people, to fight them. And still they come. You hear one chew at the trap. You pray it springs. You wait. Nothing. Then a tiny snap. Victory you'll check in the morning. For now you close your eyes again. You dream of a barn with no holes, of a winter without droppings on the windowsill, of a world where rats are mythical like dragons, told of in stories, feared only in tales, not here, not always here. But you live where tales are reality, and the shadows that move under your bed don't have names, only teeth. And so you drift off slowly to the rhythm of your breath, the crackle of a dying fire, and the soft, persistent whisper of claws on wood. And now at last, the night deepens. Not the noisy part, not the restless hour when firewood shifts and mice clatter through rafters, but the slow part, the still part, the hour when your body forgets how tired it is and simply lets go. Your child is breathing softly. The cat has curled itself like a ward around the feet of the bed. The pot over the hearth bubbles in a quiet, barely there rhythm. Water, some leaves, maybe enough flavor to be called tomorrow's broth. The rats are quieter now. Or maybe you've stopped listening. And in this hush you finally reflect. What a strange life you lead. You a simple peasant in a small, smoky world. A world of hard dirt, rough hands, scratchy wool, and old songs. A world where survival is a skill, not a guarantee. Where kindness is currency. And where the greatest enemy you face might only be 6 inches long with twitching whiskers. So, how did you manage? How did medieval peasants keep rats and mice at bay without poison, without steel traps, without city exterminators? The answer, like all things peasant, is simple, clever, and built from scraps. You hung your food from beams. You stored it in clay pots sealed with mud and stones. You trained your cat to stay hungry, but not too hungry. You stuffed holes with rags, dung ash, and superstition. You swept. You burned herbs. You tied strings and bells. You set crude traps, clay pots, tilting lids, baited planks, smoothed buckets, balanced over sticks. You lived alongside your enemy, outwitted them just long enough to keep your bread, to keep your barley, to keep your children fall day. And when the rats won, as they sometimes did, you grieved a little. Then you tried again. Because that's what you do. That's what they did. Peasant life is not noble in the way stories like to pretend. It was not all community dancing and merry festivals. It was hunger, cold blisters, and the endless push against nature, both wild and domestic. It was children with lice and neighbors with grudges. It was washing your hands in gray water and brushing your teeth with a stick. It was praying your traps caught something before the winter did. But still, it was life. Messy, raw, determined. It had its warmth, the smell of baking bread, the crackle of a dry branch in the fire, the laughter of a child watching a mouse fall into a bucket tail flailing. It had music, even if the instruments were broken. It had love, even if you never called it that. And it had the kind of grit that modern comfort will never understand. Tonight, you've walked in those shoes. You've crouched in the dark and listened to things that shouldn't be there. You've guarded your grain like treasure. You've fought a war with no end. And now finally, you can rest. The fire is low. The house is still. You made it. You made it through another day. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. But not now. Now you sleep. And as you drift off, let the quiet guide you. Let the last thoughts fall away one by one. Let your limbs soften. Let your breath slow. And let the small, strange truth of this story stay with you. You don't have to wake up in the Middle Ages. Sleep well.